we are in this like incredible circumstance where our prisons are overflowing. Yeah, our prisons are overflowing. There is no way to solve some of the underlying material conditions as to why crime even happens. Okay, so then they just like they just decide like, oh, what's the most woke way to deal with this? The most liberal woke way to deal with it is the exact same way that we deal with homeless people. Okay? Which is, of course, hilariously, laughably brutal, which is, hey, look the other way. Let homeless people live on the street and eat trash and look the other way. That's the woke thing to do. God forbid we offer them housing. God forbid we have a housing first policy in dealing with homelessness and tackling this insane crisis. God forbid we normalize the housing market so that people aren't every day, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people aren't getting priced out of housing in places like California where their jobs are. You know, God forbid we do any of that. Just let them fucking live on the street and eat trash and come jerk off, outside of your house. Okay? That's the liberal solution. The Republican solution is just to murder them. And it sucks because there is an adequate solution that other countries have utilized. Vienna is a good example of this. Red Vienna. And European social democracies have great examples of this, where they do have better pricing for their housing. It's hilariously stupid when you put it into plain terms. This guy stole a car and sold it for drug money. How do we help him? Let's make it so that employers won't hire him into legit jobs and then repeatedly fine him for his drug addiction so he has massive debt that he can't pay off through legal means. That will help. Yeah. But ultimately, when you put that dude through the system, that dude is a slave. Now you have a slave for the remainder of his years. You know what I mean? He's in the system early on. He has no options. How the fuck is he going to overcome any of that stuff? He's not. So now he's in the system, and when you're in the system, you can go make license plates for a penny an hour. You know, it's great. You can go fight wildfires in California for 2 cents an hour. Would you be okay with housing for the homeless in your neighborhood? Yes, you fucking idiot. Why wouldn't I? I already house homeless people in this neighborhood. They're just living in a fucking tent. I would much rather have them live in a house. What kind of psychotic take is that? Yo, that only is a gotcha if you're just an inhumane piece of shit. You understand? Like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? Which one's better? Having the homeless people have shelter over their heads so they have basically one of their most profoundly important needs met so that they can get on a pathway to recovery and actually talk to social workers, be able to shower, be able to fucking look for jobs, have internet, electricity, have one of their needs met. Yeah, I would much prefer that to fucking living, to have them live in a fucking tent. To have an address too, that's huge. And for the record, before someone says, oh, why don't you put them in your house then? Like, motherfucker, I live in a house so I don't have to have roommates, okay? There's a difference between privacy. I don't want to have random people, whether they're homeless or not, living in my fucking house. So shut the fuck up. Not the same. But here it is. Police in these West Coast cities disproportionately arresting unhoused people from 2017 through 2020. Unhoused people made up almost an estimated 2% of the population in each of the following cities. However, they made up in Portland 50% of the people that were arrested. 50%. They were 2% of the population, but made up 50% of the people who were arrested. Sacramento, 42%. Los Angeles, 24%. San Diego, 11%. Oakland, 7%. What do you think is going on here? Huh? It's great. What do you mean? This doesn't take into account the proportion of crimes being committed, though, right? Brother, we live in an anti-homeless, anti-poor country, okay? We live in a capitalist country. Homeless people are not productive, okay? They're not productive workers. So the attitude of capital owners is that they should fucking die or go away or be converted into productive workers, possibly at gunpoint. So, yes, While some of those unhoused people that are getting arrested because they're like, doing public indecency. Some of that is also public indecency as a consequence of not having a place to fucking shit, right? No place for hygiene. Some of it is because they are mentally incredibly unwell, okay, and they need mental health treatment. And some of that is because they're just fucking brain broken from, their brains have been fried from like living out and subjecting themselves to the conditions of nature for many, many fucking years. And yes, they have violent outbursts. Yes, of course. Like valid reasons to arrest someone. Okay? Or there are, of course, valid reasons to arrest some homeless people, for sure. Okay? But a big chunk of the reason for why 50%, despite making up 2% of the population in the city, estimated 2% of the population, they make up 50%, is because there are laws written specifically that make it illegal to be homeless. There are valid reasons for why homeless people get incarcerated. Certainly, I'm not going to say that that's not the case. But there are infinitely more awful reasons why people jail homeless people. So yeah, it's not an accident. There's also, for those of you who don't know, there is violent architecture, for example, or hostile architecture. Okay? That's how we deal with homeless people. With hostile architecture. Look at this. Look. I'm sure there's like good examples.
Buildings. Here. In 2005, sociologist Lance Hannon. Now, however, the Circle Line.
Okay, I just want to show one. Jesus. I just want one example.
Someone fed it a coin. This was
this. This is an art installation. Sorry. You know how like
old waters?
Oh, if you recall, you know how when I went to Amsterdam, they had like weird spikes under bridges and shit, and I asked like, why do they have these weird spikes? And those spikes were so that birds couldn't fucking shit under the bridges. Because that shit would erode the bricks and whatnot. And they weren't real spikes. They just like basically made it so that birds could not stand on them. Okay? That exact same thing is how people... that exact same thing is what these cities do to homeless people. They create incredibly hostile architecture on purpose so that people can't sleep on the streets, on benches and whatnot. Like in New York, I believe they took out the benches in the, here it is. Yeah, after the government of Sao Paulo, Brazil installed rocks to prevent houses from resting under this bridge, a local priest decided to destroy them. Look at this. When you sit on a bench that's this size, that is by design. It's so that no one can sleep on it. When you see a bench that has this kind of thing in the middle of it, you're like, why does this have this thing in it? That's so that homeless people can't sleep on it. This is called hostile design, hostile architecture. The answer, of course, is not to make sure that like our benches are better so that homeless people can sleep on it. The answer, of course, is homes. What if we kissed at the Pride-themed anti-homeless spike-covered underpass? Yeah. There it is. Wonderful. Good stuff. Every part of society is designed against homeless people. Every part of society is designed against people who have been priced out of the housing market, who are just trying to make ends meet, who are just trying to survive, who probably could if given the opportunity, if they didn't get priced out of the housing market and didn't have to live in their cars until they had to sell their cars and lose their job as a consequence of not having like hygienic products readily available and to make themselves look presentable for jobs and whatnot, going down that fucking going down that trajectory of eventually becoming homeless and becoming like the worst case of homelessness, which is when you're also trying to self-medicate because you're in a horrifying situation. Your number one need is not being met. Okay? You don't have an address. You have no way of cleaning yourself up. You don't have clean clothes. You have no laundry machine. All these things that we take for granted. Living inside of homes and apartments and whatnot, they have no access to. That fucks you up. That breaks your fucking brain. I said tier 3 homelessness the other day, and that really resonated with some normie friends I was chatting to about homelessness. Yeah, I've described this before. I call it 3 tiers of homelessness. I know it sounds like inhumane to describe it in such terms, but a lot of even chatters themselves have actually fucking gone through this. Okay? Tier 1 homelessness is the invisible homelessness. There are homeless people around you right now that are housing insecure that you don't even recognize. That is a person that has gotten priced out of the housing market but still has a job oftentimes. It is a person that has at least some material possessions that they've put in their car or are either doing that or couch surfing. Okay? They don't have a home, but they're couch surfing. They're living with someone else. As they look for, as they become more burdensome to people around them and it becomes harder and harder to maintain a job. Okay? That's tier 1. Tier 2 homelessness is when you are living in your car, okay, and you lose your car basically, or you're living in your car and your car gets towed. You're living in your car and you get ticketed because there's a lot of anti-homelessness provisions that make it so that you can't even live in your fucking car, right? You have no consistent way of showering. You have no consistent way of cleaning your clothes. It becomes increasingly harder and harder for you to keep a job. You have no address. Sometimes you might not even have a bank account. You become tier 2 homeless in that situation. You've been priced out of the housing market, and now you have no means of recovery. And then you arrive at tier 3 homelessness, which oftentimes is when you have been living as a homeless person, as a houseless person for an extended period of time. You start doing drugs in order to self-medicate, to basically, cope with the reality that you have been served. Okay? And ultimately, throughout the different years of living through homelessness, you no longer have a means of, you no longer have a method of dealing with it. Your brain starts fucking frying. You have trauma. Because when you're tier 2 homeless, or even tier 1 homeless, or definitely in tier 3 homelessness, you're constantly getting assaulted. Okay? You're getting assaulted by the conditions of nature, which is the reason why, like, even fucking cavemen lived in goddamn caves. You know what I mean? You need shelter. You're constantly being assaulted by other people, whether it be other homeless people or other non-homeless people that are fucking beating the shit out of you, stealing your shit. This is a ongoing problem. If you're a woman, it's especially traumatic because there's also sexual assault on top of that. This happens inside of shelters even more frequently. Part of the reason why shelters are not an adequate solution. If you've ever talked to a homeless person, or if you've ever read about this sort of thing, you understand that shelters are really just not good at all. They're awful. People steal your shit. That is, if you're lucky enough to be able to bring your shit into the shelter, because shelters oftentimes will not allow you to bring any of your material possessions. Okay? They won't let you bring your pets. They won't let you bring your material possessions, and you have to be cold turkey. And going cold turkey is not exactly easy if you're already hooked on drugs. So a lot of people literally choose to, and then when you pair that up with assault, and when you pair that up with the likelihood of sexual assault and property theft, okay, all of a sudden, it seems better to sleep in a fucking tent than have a roof over your head when you're inside of a shelter. Okay? So you're making that bargain in your head year over year, okay? Then you're also taking drugs on the side. Your brain becomes completely fucking warped. Once you're on the 3rd tier of homelessness, that is the type of homeless person that you regularly see in public and have negative experiences with, negative associations with. That's the lady with the hardened leather-looking skin that is half naked. You know what I mean? That's what people think about when they think about homeless people. That's the person that is that is the homeless person that is the most easily dehumanized by mainstream media. That's the homeless person that you probably had a negative association with. And that's part of the reason why you're like, oh no, we can't help these people. They're all on drugs. They're all crazy. And of course, that's the homeless person that is the hardest to deal with as well. That is the hardest to bring back into society. That's the hardest to heal. And no matter which tier of homelessness we're talking about, the most adequate way is to use a housing first policy. Immediately find them permanent shelter, to give them a sense of autonomy, to help them regain their humanity. You can immediately tackle every tier 1 homeless person that way, immediately. Like, you have provided them with shelter, all of a sudden, boom, their problems are gone. Like 99% of their problems are gone. Same with tier 2 homeless people, which might require a little bit more care in the form of like social workers helping them out. And same with tier 3 homeless people as well, with more adequate mental health checks and therapy, immediate therapy, and recovery and rehabilitation programs that are readily available for them, training programs after they have gone on a pathway to recovery. In that way, one, you create an entire new industry that is currently super underfunded. I mean, there is a capitalist alternative to this even, okay? It's just you take a short-term profit cut, okay? Your house is not going to be as expensive because now there's more houses that are readily available. If you're bought into the hospitality industry, maybe they took some of the motels and turned them into or converted them into housing, okay? But now there's a new industry working on this, the gigantic new industry that's working on it. Now, on top of that, your housing market, the housing market will recover ultimately because there's no fucking homeless people in your neighborhood, okay, in the long term. And ultimately, it would be better for society as well. But of course, capitalism forces people into thinking in short-term benefits. So they can't do that, especially if there's any kind of fucking short-term profit loss. Oh my God, that is the worst thing you could ever advocate for. God forbid.